Welcome everyone. We're super excited you're here. I just want to give you a heads up. Like, we had this discussion. I'll introduce myself, and Charlotte will introduce herself in a sec, but just wanted to say we had this whole discussion about, do we put some PowerPoints together? Do we have this slick presentation? Because we're good at that. But one of the things we thought is we actually just wanted to have a conversation. Like, we'll have a bit of a conversation with each other, but what we would be super excited about is those of you that have the capacity to put something in the chat box or the question and answer box. We would love it to be as interactive as possible. And we're also up, if you have questions afterwards, you can email the Dementia Society or ask. We're really happy to respond to things like that. But we just wanted to, Charlotte and I talk about getting our human back on, which for me is about just being in this open, honest, vulnerable conversation about what we're going through. So I just, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and our business, and then I'll throw it over to Charlotte to talk about her expertise, and then we'll kind of just start a conversation. We will also be sending some stuff out afterwards. We have an anxiety toolkit that we have available, which is free. It's part of something called Peer Zone that we've been connected to in New Zealand. My expertise is in the individual stuff, and I've kind of worked in a range of countries, and almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I lie hysterically, I made Canada my home, and I plan on becoming a permanent resident if they'll let me. Hopefully they like the accent, and staying here to do that. So Dean asked us if we could just chat a little today about like anxiety in the world at the moment, because a lot's happening. So we'll be doing that. And just as a heads up about our business, Charlotte and I started that almost 2 years ago now. And we wanted to create a business that was about capacity building, not empire building, and was about people just being real with each other and talking about, like, how do we get through the tough times together? What do we do? How do we support people that we're, you know, that are in our lives, whether there's someone with dementia, like some other kind of mental health issue, and like Alzheimer's, or whether they're just other people in our lives that are having a bit of a struggle at times. So my title for our company is Chief Non-Conformist, because if you get to know me, you'll know I like to think outside the box. I like to have different conversations, and I like to push the boundaries of the way we've always done things. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I'm going to throw it over to Charlotte now.
Thanks, Robyn, and thanks you guys for starting conversations in our chat box. So like I said, anything you want to add to the chat box, it's always by invitation, not expectation, and we're here to answer any of your questions. So I am Robyn's business partner, like she mentioned, and I bring the perspective of a family member of somebody who has mental health challenges. But in preparing for today, I had been talking with Robyn about my experience in supporting both my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. My father-in-law had Parkinson's and dementia, and what that was like for our family when we were going through that. And so I was bringing up a lot of really amazing, happy memories and some sad memories. He passed away in his late 80s, and he had a great life, so hoping that what we have to say today will offer some support to you and some suggestions, and turning it back over to you, Robyn.
It'd be great if you guys on the Zoom would be prepared to throw something in, like to the chat box about like what you're dealing with at the moment, or anything that's on top for you that you really want us to chat with about today, or give us a heads up about who you are. because what we want to do is make it useful to you. And me just coming and chatting and going, this is how you deal with anxiety, like, isn't very individualized. So we're hoping that you guys start to feel comfortable doing that kind of thing. So thinking about like the world at the moment, right? If we think about 6 months ago, none of us saw this coming. We were coming along, dealing with our lives, coping with whatever was coming up. And I know that in speaking last year with the Dementia Society and meeting, you know, some of you, that like dealing with that brings its own uncertainties and stress and anxiety. And then what happened was we layered COVID on top of that. And like, let's be real, none of us know what that looks like moving forward. Every day it seems like this changing feast. Like it's, oh, it's going to look like this and we're going to open this up, and then it's like, oh no, something else has happened and we might not be doing that. And I think even as we go forward and as the world starts to reopen, I know they're very clear that things could change in a heartbeat if we got more cases or things like that. Now, here's one of the things that I've been talking to people about, and we've been doing quite a lot of conversations with peer supporters. We have free Zoom calls a few times a week for peer supporters, and hearing like some of their conversation. And I was sharing a couple of things in that kind of conversation to start with. Is one of the things when people were talking about it's all uncertain and the world's uncertain and we don't know what it looks like, the reality is for us to kind of think back on is there is no day that we ever know exactly what's going to happen. There is no certainties in life apart from that at some point, somewhere in our journey, we are going to die. Absolutely. That's like a given. But the rest of our lives is just this place of so much uncertainty in terms of, like, we never know if we're going to walk outside and something's going to happen. Like, there might be a big storm that has an impact. There might be a car accident where we're not expecting that. We might win the lottery. Yo, wouldn't that be cool? But the only things that we have control over any time, sorry, I've got a bit of a cough. It's not COVID. Just know that. It's dry throat because I talk a lot. But the only thing that we have control over at any given time, like, is us, is what we're doing in each moment. And I think one of the things is we've not been, and I talk we collectively, because I don't know you. I don't know who's on the call unless someone's putting it into the little chat box, and we'll try and keep a handle on that. But it really is that place of, like, we didn't think about it in our past as much, that we didn't have control over a lot of things. And I know sometimes when we're dealing with people with challenges, we do, you know, kind of go, I don't know what the next moment holds. But I think one of the things that I sit with for me with this COVID pandemic is that I didn't have control over a lot of things before. All I had control over is what I did in each moment. And so I'm centering myself back to that, to see what that looks like reminding myself that it wasn't different. I just had a different mindset on it. Yeah, I know that, you know, people go, yeah, but there's this thing that's killing us. Well, there's a lot of things that could kill us. I'm not downplaying this, right? I'm being very clear about that. But we weren't as worried about what was happening with that as we are with this, because it's forefront, it's on the news. I know for me, when this first started happening, I was like, oh my God, I have to watch the news every minute. What's happening? What's the Prime Minister saying? What's the Premier saying? What are we doing? And I got to a point for me where I had to step back and not watch. And truth be told, in the last 3 weeks, actually, I think probably the last 4 weeks, I might have watched the news twice because I got so caught up in every little detail. Now, I do go on my app and take a look at, what's happening, how many people, and so forth. But I'm coming back to what can I do to control my situation and me. And, I'm fortunate and unfortunate at the same time, I think. Like, I live with my dog and it's just me. And Charlotte and I were talking the other day, like, I'm a pretty social person. What I want to do is to create the best I can do in this moment. And so I started like doing social connectedness and connecting with people, but I did it in different ways. So I started like being a little more discerning about who I was connecting with. Like, was I connecting with someone that was running around like a chicken with their head cut off, getting all worried and having me I was taking some of that on as well? Or was I able to kind of connect with people who I could have great conversations with, but not come away more drained? And I get that there's places in this for you guys that you may be living with someone who's in different stages of dementia or Alzheimer's. And like there may be some people who like are angry and upset and don't really understand why they can't go out and do things. Or it might be that people are in a place where they're not connecting anymore. And I think that anger piece, the peer supporters talked about that at one point, that there was a week or so a while ago where every single person was angry that I knew or spoke to. It was like, I've had enough of this. What's happening? I want to get out. I need to connect. And so, like, we were just talking about that it's okay to have moments where you're super angry. And what are the things that you might do when you're in those moments? So I know for me, I have a pillow and I might go into my room and I might like smack the pillow. I might go into the shower. I might cry. I might, and then like I try and center myself. So for me, centering myself is about a breathing. I'm not a person that does like the breathing techniques or like any particular form of that, but I know that when I get super stressed, like for me, it's about like just being quiet and peaceful for a moment. Even just one moment can actually bring me back to a place where I know that I can get through the next moment. Um, um, and that like helped for me. I know that I've used music as a way of like centering myself again and bringing myself back. I know that I do, for me, I do funny little live conversations on Facebook every day at 4 o'clock on the Robyn Priest Facebook page where I do something silly. So I've like done a triathlon in my apartment. I've done a baseball game. I've done a tennis game with myself, purely because that like brings me a little joy. And so I'm like starting to kind of think outside the box. So it's the connecting with different people. And I also know I have to be careful because we've also got extroverts who are becoming introverts, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but just like keeping an eye on those things. If you haven't heard from people that you may know and normally hear from, like maybe just reach out and see how they are like doing. I'm just looking at a bit of the chat, and I saw the repetitive kind of people saying the same things over and over again, and I know that can be a little frustrating, and it's that part is, can you take like 2 minutes to walk outside? And I know when I'm working with people who get stuck in a loop, like what I have to do, and I can only talk from my experience, I can't talk from yours, and I'm going to throw it to Charlotte in a minute. But what I tend to do is like try and have a shut off switch for me where I go back and think it's a new conversation. Because I know when I'd be like, oh my God, they've said the same thing again, I used to get really frustrated with it. Getting back to thinking for me about what can we control in this, right? If someone's repetitive, like we don't have control over that. We have control over, can we sit with the fact that we're in Groundhog Day, as Charlotte called it. And I loved it when she told me that strategy of hers, and like, oh, it's Groundhog Day, here we come again. It added a bit of humour, enough to be able to get through a particular situation. And, you know, I see Charlotte talking about the guilty bit. I feel guilty because I'm taking time. So, you know, I'm here by myself. I'm not dealing with anyone, but like I can relate it to my business. So before this, do I stay or do I can't go moment happened for me, was I had this thing about the business. It's got my name on it. And I was all caught up in this. I have to make sure it's perfect. I have to, and I put all this overwhelming pressure on myself. I can't give it to anyone else. I can't let Charlotte do this. I can't let the other people that contract with us do this. Because what if they screw up and it's my reputation, it's my name? And I had this swirl going on in my head. And like when I woke up that next morning and it was like, actually, I want something different here. And I can control what I can control, and I have to trust. And, you know, I'm trusting the universe right now. And I'm not religious, but other people might be talking about trusting God or whatever, and you might not be. But I'm trusting my inner self to know what's right. And so what I was able to do was step back a little. I can do self-care. So I was working 7 days a week. You know, until COVID, I was flying 3 out of 4 weeks. I was like this. My head was never quiet. My whole life, my head was never quiet. It was always busy. And I got to this place on that morning of saying, if I don't start to look at things differently, A, I'm not any use to people. B, I'm irritable. And 3, I'm actually going to die really young. No, I didn't want that. I'm not young, I'm 54, but young enough. My grandma just died a couple of weeks ago. She was 105, so I figure I've got a good 50 years left. But what I did was start to say, I can't do everything. I can't be everything to everyone, because I also get a lot of calls from people who like are feeling like they can't cope with COVID, can't deal with life, don't want to be here anymore. And I was taking everything on, and I realized I actually can't. Like, I can do the best that I can do in any moment, and I need to take time for me. So I've taken moments of 5 minutes here and there, and I've taken days where I've just said, I'm going to have a day where I need a day, and I'm going to, like, if I need something done, I'm going to have to work out how someone else gets it done. And there's places for that. And I strongly encourage you to stay connected to other people who are going through similar things. Like, I know you have the support groups, and being able to realize that, like, probably how you're feeling is the same as a bunch of other people in terms of the support, but also the COVID added on top of that. Like for me, I did that when my ex-partner's mum was, dealing with Alzheimer's, and some days she was connecting with me on those discussions and some days she didn't. And those days she didn't, it was about like, where else can I go to connect, to talk about my feelings? So it is those places that, like for me, it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to be perfect all the time. You can have those moments. And it might be an hour. It might be 5 minutes. It might be a day where you're not okay. And my thing is about reaching out. Who do you have that you can reach out to? Is it people in those support groups that you go to? Is it like a friend? And I know that our friends don't always understand what we're going through. But if you have a supportive friend that you can just vent to, that is non-judgmental. I know it's about that connection piece. For me is huge, even more so now, because we're not always able to see people like physically, right? So it's finding ways that you can do that. Like I've had friends do Trivial Pursuit or a game of checkers, like on Zoom, just even for a few minutes. I've as I said, I do those funny Facebook Live things, or I've started to do country and Western today. That's it, and learn a new step. And then I'm like, oh, I've done that. It's just taking those moments, but it's also super important. There's lots of people running around going, yeah, I'm learning a new language. I'm like reading these books. I'm learning this instrument. And isn't this the greatest time to do that? Because we're stuck at home. And I want to say that it's okay to not be that person too. That the reality is, like, it's just okay to be however you are in any given moment and like be with that. One of the things that I'm hoping comes out of COVID, I think, I hesitate to say this loudly, but I think there's been a silver lining in this, that the world has run around and has been so busy and people have said to us, suck it up, you'll be right, get over it, just don't worry about it. And because they haven't really understood, right? And now we have a world of people who are dealing with anxiety. Like it's not one or two over here. Like it's a world of people. And so my hope is that as we go through this, we have a world that comes out with more compassion and empathy for everything you're all going through. Because they've had an experience, not the same experience, but they've had an experience of not knowing what's going to happen next, of maybe their friends, family have like come down with COVID and they don't know what happens with that or where that's going to like go, or they're worried about getting it and they're becoming, super, super obsessed with certain things. I know some of my friends have raw hands because they're like super obsessed with washing their hands. I'm personally doing the same as I've always done. Don't hold that against me, please. Because I do wash my hands, right, and I am careful. But I think as we go through this, I'm hoping there's places like that we will have more people that we can chat to, because more people have gone through something extremely out of the ordinary. And I was chatting with a friend with major anxiety the other day, and she went, I've been preparing for this my entire life. And now I'm here, I'm calm. And I was like, what? She goes, everything I ever dreamt was going to happen is happening. And now I'm calm because it's just here. So I think one of the things too, if you know other people that have had a diagnosis of anxiety, been dealing with it, whether it's diagnosed or not, they also have some pretty cool coping mechanisms because they've been living with it forever. So reach out to those guys too. I will continue to talk about those quiet moments, whether you call them meditation or whatever. And I've learned to do them even when there's people chatting to me. So Charlotte and I go walking sometimes together, and I noticed myself yesterday, like Charlotte was chatting away in my ear, and like I was just zenning. I was like, which, you know, she may or may not have noticed, but I took a moment even in the chatter. And so I think it's just about practicing some of those kind of things. I'd love, are there any questions out there? We'd love to hear questions, comments, thoughts. If you thought we were crap, tell us. If you thought we had some useful stuff, tell us. I'm going to throw it to Charlotte.
Hey, Robyn, thanks. You know, one of the things that in my family story is that early on, I was like, I got this. And, you know, some things started to happen to me physically. And I know now, looking back, that it was a huge amount of anxiety that was going on as a caregiver supporting somebody who was struggling. But I was so caught up in trying to do everything perfect and supporting my daughter, I'll say, that I really started to neglect myself. And that story was the same with my mother-in-law, who was supporting my father-in-law. She was being that 100% caregiver, hiding a ton from the rest of the family. And she had that attitude, I've got this. And what eventually happened in their story is she hit the wall. She couldn't do it. And she hadn't opened up to all of us of, you know, what was actually going on. And she was a very proud woman and thought she could handle it. And so at the point where it got to it, we had to find a place for him to go quite quickly in order to support her health conditions that had shown up. And I was the daughter-in-law in that story. So, you know, I was supporting, you know, my brothers and sisters-in-law and my partner at the time as well in that story. Not that it would change, but it was their story, and I was just on the outside and supporting. So I encourage you that if any of this is resonating with you, in that, hey, I'm popping Zantac, or, you know, I'm eating too many Tums, or, you know, my anxiety is through the roof, to take a real strong look at your own self-care and start really trying to figure out how to support yourself. In my daughter's story, I was the same with that. And then when I started to take a look at my own self-care and starting to take care of myself, it started to reflect back into how I cared for her. And then as well as her anxiety decreased, because she was feeling a lot of the anxiety that I was. And again, I'm not trying to put blame back on the caregiver. It's just that reality of that parallel process that I talked about. And if, you know, you're lacking someone that you can chat with or support with, I will encourage you guys to reach out, because it will be a huge game changer for you guys as well. And sorry, I'm just reading the chat as well. Back to you, Robyn. I'm just going to read this one.
No, finish your comment. I'll read the chat.
Okay. Again, I can't stress enough about that parallel process and supporting yourself. And I know you're saying you can't relate because dementia is different, but the messaging is always the same. It's you guys, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of the one you're supporting, and figuring out what works best for you. And because your situation, they're all different, and I know that. And I encourage you guys to come and join us on our family support, because sometimes having a different perspective where it's not completely your world perspective might add a tool or a trick. I know some of the support groups my daughter chooses to go to are not related to what she has, but she just really bonds with that those people in the group, and that's part of her self-care. So think a little bit outside the box, and that is part of our business. Like Robyn said, her title is Chief Nonconformist. You know, she's big on thinking outside the box, and I'm just, you know, all encouraging to find something that works for you. My closing remarks to all of you are, you guys are amazing. You're doing an incredible job juggling your world. I salute all of you for keep doing what you're doing. I know it's hard. And you know what, reach out, guys. I mean, like I said, we offer a group tonight. You'll love our colleague, Kirsten. She's a gentle soul, has got a wealth of lived experience in that head of hers. And I enjoy it every time that we get together and chat. But please take care of yourselves and be kind to yourselves. You know, you've got this.
And you can, I'm just putting the website into the chat box in case anyone wants to find that group. But yeah, thank you so much for letting us come and chat. And it's not the traditional webinar. Here's a slide, let's chat to the slide. We wanted it to be more of a conversation. So thank you, everyone.
Take care.